Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expected to attend the G7 summit currently underway in Japan in person. Evacuations continue in Italy's northern region of Emilia-Romagna as the death toll from the flooding rises to 13, with some people still missing.
The Greek Prime Minister and opposition leader urge voters for their support as the country heads to the polls on Sunday.
Leaders of the G7 group of major economies laying down wreaths at the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum as the crucial three-day summit gets underway in Japan. The city was victim to the first atomic bomb attack during World War II, and this memorial serves as a reminder of the horrors of war. As meetings get underway, Ukrainian officials say President Volodymyr Zelensky will attend the gathering in person. With the war in Ukraine on top of the agenda, he's expected to ask US President Joe Biden and other leaders to reaffirm their support for his country. The Group of Seven has already pledged more sanctions against Russia, as well as promising a united front against China's assertive foreign policy. Meanwhile, hundreds of demonstrators took to the streets of Hiroshima to denounce the three-day gathering. They held up banners damning what they described as the imperialist summit, along with other anti-war messages. But the war in Ukraine is not the only topic on the agenda. France says it will use the opportunity to address the climate crisis and artificial intelligence. The aftermath of yet another night of Russian attacks, the 9th this month. Kyiv says it shot down 29 of the 30 missiles launched by Moscow in the airstrikes, but there had been some damage from falling debris. As the unprecedented wave of attacks continued, 8 cruise missiles were fired over the southern port city of Odessa, with 1 person killed and 2 wounded in the attack. Kyiv also said it's repaired the Patriot air defense system, damaged in an attack on Tuesday, despite Russian claims that it had been destroyed. The Russian Defense Ministry, however, claims to have successfully hit all assigned targets in the nighttime high-precision missile strikes, destroying significant stockpiles of Ukrainian forces' weapons and ammunition. Speaking in Lisbon, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has welcomed the announcement by allies that they will provide cruise missiles and train Ukrainian pilots to use Western fighter jets. He says he expects the alliance to commit to spending 2% of their GDP on defense at its next summit in July. A helicopter hovers over the flooded streets of a town in Emilia-Romagna as rescue workers evacuate yet another person from their home. Some 20,000 people have been left homeless in the northern region, with 41 towns and villages destroyed by water. The death toll from the floods has risen to 13, but several people are still missing after torrential rains pushed rivers and tributaries to burst their banks.
Non abbiamo mai visto un lavoro così in tanti anni qui.
Mai visto?
No, a lungo no.
Qui il comune si sta facendo anche da fare, però il problema è che siamo colpiti in massa da tutte le parti. Adesso sembra abbia rotto un altro fiume, quindi non lo so.
People in despair as their homes, farmlands and infrastructure are underwater, the most catastrophic flooding to affect Italy in 100 years. Although the rains have stopped, the sewage systems are saturated and water continues to overflow. The region, which has been suffering from a drought, estimates losses in the millions from the widespread damage.
Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said stability and economic security are at stake as the country prepares to vote in its general election on Sunday. In his penultimate speech, Mitsotakis from the ruling centre-right New Democracy Party hit out at the leader of the left-wing opposition Syriza Party, Alexis Tsipras.
Κόβει ξανά 83 δις από το λεφτόδεντρο και ζητά ο αθεόφοβος δικαιοσύνη παντού. Παντού εκτός από δίπλα του, όπου έχει το καταδικασμένο 13-0 στο ειδικό δικαστήριο Νίκο Παπά. Το ερώτημα της Κυριακής είναι από τώρα μπροστά μας. Θέλουμε σταθερότητα ή άγνωστες περιπέτειες. Με λίγα λόγια, προτιμάμε κυβέρνηση Νέας Δημοκρατίας και Πρωθυπουργό Μητσοτάκη ή κυβέρνηση ΣΥΡΙΖΑ και Πρωθυπουργό Τσίπρα. Η επιλογή πλέον περνά στα δικά σας χέρια.
Meanwhile, Tsipras addressed supporters in Athens, urging citizens to vote for an end to the Mitsotakis government, and called on all progressive parties to be open to negotiations to form a coalition government on Monday.
Ζητάμε λοιπόν σήμερα με εντιμότητα και με ανοιχτή καρδιά από τον ελληνικό λαό όχι μια δεύτερη ευκαιρία για να κυβερνήσουμε, αλλά την πρώτη ευκαιρία να κυβερνήσουμε με βάση το πρόγραμμά μας, με βάση τα θέλω μας και όχι τα πρέπει, χωρίς μνημόνια, χωρίς καταναγκασμούς, χωρίς την Τρόικα, χωρίς το Σόιμπλε, χωρίς όλους αυτούς που μας επέβαλαν την πολιτική τους. Να λοιπόν τι σημαίνει ψήφος στο ΣΥΡΙΖΑ και αλλαγή. Σημαίνει αύξηση μισθών, μείωση τιμών, ρύθμιση χρεών και ένα δίκαιο, αποτελεσματικό, ισχυρό κοινωνικό κράτος δίπλα στον πολίτη. Αυτό σημαίνει ψήφος στο ΣΥΡΙΖΑ και αλλαγή. Με φόρα την Κυριακή να αλλάξουμε τη χώρα. Γεια σας.
Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has agreed to meet with the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev. The Russian-mediated summit will take place next week in Moscow. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will also host the foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan for talks in the Russian capital today. The two Caucasus neighbours have fought two wars over the Nagorno-Karabakh region and often see deadly clashes along their volatile border. Russia has announced it is prepared to act as a possible mediator in the war in Sudan. Speaking on the sidelines of the Russia Islamic World Kazan Forum, Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov said Moscow is ready to provide warring parties with a platform for negotiations. After more than 1 month of fighting between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group, the UN says the country needs €2.7 billion in emergency aid. Around 1,000 people have been killed so far and 1 million others have been displaced. One by one, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with attendees as he hosted the China Central Asia Summit held in Xi'an, a city historically linked to the Silk Road network of global trade routes. Coinciding with the G7 leaders meeting in Japan, experts say this summit reflects Beijing's desire to strengthen regional influence and fill the vacuum that Russia's war in Ukraine has created in the former Soviet states. The first of its kind in 31 years, the summit aims to expand China's reach and advance transport links. Beijing's trade with Central Asian countries reached €64 billion in 2022, and in the first quarter of this year rose by 22%.
The official topic of this week's Central Asian Summit in Xi'an is the promotion of China's Belt and Road Initiative project. But according to Western analysts, it is less about the transit of goods and more about Russia's loss of influence in the region, with summit host Beijing ready to take its place.
It's the first time that Russia, which for decades, if not a couple of centuries, has been the hegemon in Central Asia, is excluded. And this follows on in the wake of Russia losing friendships across the region and China pouncing on the opportunity to become the new hegemon.
After the start of the war in Ukraine, plans for the transit of Chinese goods through Russian territory were frozen. Now, participants at the Xi'an summit are set to discuss a middle route which completely bypasses Russia. Russia's trade with Central Asia doubled last year. However, the EU says there is evidence that the former Soviet republics are using re-exports to help the Kremlin avoid sanctions, something Brussels plans to target with a set of new measures.
And this, to my mind, is the end of Russia's pivot to Asia that was launched by Vladimir Putin at the APEC meeting in Vladivostok in 2012, when he said that the purpose of this is for the Russian economy to catch Chinese winds in the sails of the Russian economy. Now I would say that the Russian economy is dismasted and drifting as a wreck in the sea. And the Chinese don't give favors.
Russia is also losing its position as the guarantor of security in Central Asia. Experts say China is not yet ready to assume the role and remains focused on doing business. A Hebrew Bible more than 1,000 years old has sold for just over 35 million euro, setting a record for the most valuable manuscript ever to be auctioned. The leather-bound Codex Sassoon, which dates to the late 9th to the early 10th century, is the earliest near-complete Hebrew Bible known to still exist. It was sold by Sotheby's in New York following a 4-minute bidding battle between two bidders. The Bible was bought by Alfred H. Moses, who is donating it to the Annual Museum of the Jewish people in Tel Aviv, Israel.
Indiana Jones fever swept day 3 of Cannes, ahead of Thursday's screening of the latest film in the series, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's the last appearance in the saga for its star, 80-year-old Harrison Ford. Inside the theatre, he received a standing ovation before being presented with the honorary Palme d'Or. Another American actor walking the red carpet was Sean Penn in Cannes with the paramedic drama Black Flies by French director Jean-Stéphane Sauveur.
Since his debut in the competition nearly 20 years ago, tennis heavyweight Rafael Nadal hasn't missed a Roland Garros tournament. This year, for the first time, he will have to watch from the sidelines. The Spaniard, the current French Open title holder, has won the tournament a record 14 times and says he is pulling out because of a lingering hip injury. And in more shock news, Nadal, who turns 37 next month, also announced that next year could be the final season of his career.